Hey, it's Nathan. Before we start, I want you to sit with one word: forfeiture. It sounds like paperwork. It's actually the quiet machine this whole story turns on, and it's real. In a lot of places, police can take your car, your cash, even your house, by charging the property instead of the person. No arrest required. No conviction required. You want it back? You sue the government, on your own dime, against their clock. Now imagine a small unit of officers who figured out that the easiest people to rob that way are the ones who can't fight back. The elderly, the broke, and the families of soldiers who are deployed halfway around the world. Your daddy's overseas, no one's coming. They actually said that. What they didn't know was who the daddy was, or what he did for a living, or that there was a second camera in that truck they'd never find. This is a story about patience beating power, about a man who never once raised his voice and took an entire crooked machine apart bolt by bolt. Stay to the end, because the way he set the final trap is the most satisfying thing I've narrated in a long time. Let's get into it. Cordell, Alabama, was the kind of town you only noticed from the highway, and the highway was the whole point. U.S. Route 84 ran through Ardith County like a seam. 4 lanes of trucks and travelers and out-of-state plates moving between 2 bigger places. And the men who worked that seam had learned it could be mined. Nico Keech had grown up 9 miles south of it, on a red dirt road where his father repaired small engines and taught his son that a quiet man is not a weak man, only a patient one. Ronan had carried that lesson into 20 years with the Army's Special Forces, a Green Beret, an 18Z team sergeant, the man who trained other men to survive the worst places on Earth. He had spent those years in villages most Americans couldn't find on a map, sitting on dirt floors drinking tea with elders, learning that the fastest way to lose a war was to be loud, and the fastest way to win one was to listen until you understood exactly how a thing was built, because anything built by men could be taken apart by men. He had a boy named Nico, 13 and all elbows and opinions, and a daughter named Pearl who was 4 and believed her father hung the moon each night personally. Their mother, Robin, had died 2 years earlier of a cancer that moved faster than anyone could, and in the hole she left behind, Ronan had done the only thing he knew how to do. He had made his family into a small, disciplined, loving unit, and then, because the country asked, and because he did not know how to say no, he had deployed one more time. This rotation took him to the Sahel, to a dusty forward post on the edge of a desert where he advised local forces hunting the men who burned villages for sport. His sister, Shay, a labor and delivery nurse with a laugh like a screen door, moved into the house to hold the line while he was gone. Before he left, Ronan did what he always did to any vehicle he owned. He wired a second camera into the family truck. Not the cheap dash unit stuck to the windshield. That one was decoy, obvious. The kind a man would rip out if he wanted the record gone. The real one lived behind the rear-view trim, a pinhole lens on a cellular modem he'd built from a kit, uploading to a private server on a delay. He didn't do it because he feared Cordell. He did it because a habit that keeps you alive in Mali does not switch off when you cross a county line. Shay rolled her eyes when he showed her. "You think somebody's going to steal a 9-year-old pickup with 190,000 miles on it," she said. Ronan just smiled and said, "I like knowing things." It was the most important sentence he would say all year, and neither of them knew it. Sergeant Chance Delroy did not think of himself as a thief. He thought of himself as a businessman who happened to wear a badge, and the distinction mattered to him the way it matters to every man who has decided the rules are for other people. Delroy ran the Ardith County Highway Interdiction Unit, 3 officers and a bored Belgian Malinois named Kane, and on paper the unit existed to interdict drugs moving up the 84. In practice, it existed to interdict money. Delroy had learned early that the drug war had left behind a beautiful loophole called civil asset forfeiture, and that the genius of it was that the property itself was the defendant. He could not prove a driver was a criminal. He did not need to. He only had to develop a suspicion, articulate it in a report, and seize. A car, a roll of cash, the gold chain off a man's neck, and then the burden flipped, and the victim had to prove a negative in a civil court, which cost more in legal fees than the thing was worth, which meant almost nobody ever tried. Delroy had turned that math into a career. He had help. Chief Deputy Devlin Roper was the brain of it, a soft-spoken man who never touched a highway and never had to, because he controlled the paperwork, the forfeiture filings, the Cordell Police Foundation that received the proceeds, the friendly magistrate who signed orders without reading them. Roper had a genius for making stolen things look donated. The seized cars went to a lot owned by a man named Hoke Yandel, who ran Yandel Towing and Auto Auction out on the frontage road, and Hoke turned them into clean cash through weekend auctions where the high bidder was often another shell Roper controlled. Above them both sat Sheriff Tull Bracken, elected 4 times, who did not ask questions because the Foundation bought the department its new cruisers and bought the sheriff his re-elections. And a man does not examine the engine of a car that is carrying him exactly where he wants to go. They had run this quietly for 11 years. They had learned which drivers to pick, the ones with out-of-state plates and no local lawyer, the ones who were old, the ones who were poor, and Delroy's favorite, because their spouses were gone and their attention was elsewhere, the families of deployed service members. He had a base directory. He knew the deployment cycles. He thought of it as a season. The night it happened, Shay had taken the kids to a family readiness event on the far side of the county, a barbecue for the families of soldiers who were downrange, and she was driving them home on the 84 a little after 10. Pearl was asleep in her car seat, boneless, the way only small children sleep, one shoe off. Nico was in the front, phone in his hand, arguing with his aunt about whether he could stay up. Behind them, a set of headlights closed the distance fast, and then the light bar lit the inside of the truck blue and red, and Shay's stomach dropped the way everyone's does, even the innocent, especially the innocent. Sergeant Delroy took his time walking up. He had run the plate before he lit them up. The truck came back to a deployed Green Beret, and Delroy's mouth had actually watered. He told Shay she'd been weaving. She hadn't. He told her Kane had alerted on the vehicle before he'd even let the dog out. He asked her to step out, and when she asked, politely, whether she was being detained, he told Nico to get out too. And Nico, 13, scared, filming on the phone because his father had taught him that a camera is armor, said, "Sir, we didn't do anything. This is our truck." Delroy took the phone. He would say later it was secured as evidence. And then, because Nico did the one thing a scared 13-year-old will do, which is to reach for his own phone, Delroy grabbed the back of the boy's neck and drove his face down into the hot metal of the hood, once, hard, and leaned down close to his ear. "Your daddy's overseas," he said, almost gentle. "No one's coming." While Nico bled from his lip onto the paint, Officer Miller Hayes was in the back seat with a folding knife, cutting open the padding of Pearl's car seat, while the little girl screamed. Supervising a probable cause search, Officer Reggie Porter, the newest of the 3, stood by the cruiser and looked at his own boots and said nothing, and hated himself, and said nothing. They found what they had brought to find, a small bag of white powder that Hayes produced from Pearl's car seat, like a magician pulling a coin from a child's ear. And they seized the truck, and Shay's $400 of grocery cash, and they left the 3 of them on the shoulder of the highway at 11 at night to call somebody for a ride. Delroy handed Nico's phone back after deleting the video. He was thorough. He was always thorough. He did not know about the second camera. It had recorded all of it, the weaving that never happened, the dog that never alerted, the knife in the car seat, the powder appearing from nowhere, and every word Delroy said with his mouth an inch from a bleeding boy's ear. And it had uploaded, on its patient delay, to a server that pinged a phone on the other side of the planet. Ronan Keech watched his son's face hit the hood from 6,000 miles away, at 4 in the morning local time, sitting on the edge of a cot in a plywood hut with the desert going gray outside the window. He watched it twice. He did not stand up. He did not throw the phone. His heart was a drum against his ribs, and his hands were steady, and in the strange doubled way of men who have trained their bodies to be calm precisely when their souls are screaming, he felt himself go very cold and very clear, the way he did before the worst nights of his career. There is a kind of anger that is hot and useless, and there is a kind that is cold and organized, and Ronan had spent 2 decades learning to convert one into the other. He watched the video a 3rd time, this time not as a father but as a professional, cataloging faces, unit numbers, the name on the sergeant's chest, Delroy, the way the 3rd officer stood apart, the way the whole thing moved with the smoothness of a routine. This was not an accident. This was a practice thing, which meant there were others, which meant there was a system. And a system, Ronan knew, was a gift, because a system is a machine, and he had spent his life taking machines apart. He did not call a lawyer. A lawyer fights one case. Ronan did not want to win one case. He picked up the phone and called his old unit. The first call went to a man named Titus Rhodes, who had carried a rifle beside Ronan on 3 continents and now carried a badge for the FBI's Public Corruption and Civil Rights section out of the Birmingham field office. Titus answered on the second ring, heard 4 sentences, and stopped being sleepy. "Color of law," he said. "That's federal. If it's a pattern, it's conspiracy against rights. And if there's money moving, we can hang a RICO on it. But Ronan, I can't build a federal case on 1 video and a father's word. I need the pattern. I need it clean, so a defense lawyer can't touch it." Ronan said, "Then I'll get you the pattern." The second call went to Rex Sundberg, who had been the quietest, most invisible man on the team, the one who could sit in a parked car for 11 hours and become part of the street, and who now ran a small surveillance consultancy in Atlanta and owed Ronan nothing and everything. Rex listened, and then he said the thing that made Ronan love him. "I can be in Ardith County tomorrow." "What's the county look like from the air?" Ronan requested emergency leave that morning. His commander, a wiry lieutenant colonel named Marek Dabrowski, read the situation in Ronan's face before he finished the first sentence, signed the paperwork, and said only, "Go home, take it apart, and Keech, do it right, so it stays taken apart." Ronan said he intended to. Rex went to work like weather, slow, total, impossible to notice until it was everywhere. He rented a nothing sedan and a cheap apartment and spent his first 3 days simply watching the 84, logging every stop the interdiction unit made, photographing every driver, timing the routine. The pattern jumped out of the noise almost immediately. The unit stopped out-of-state plates and old cars, and it stopped them at a rate no legitimate drug enforcement could explain. And the dog, Rex noted, alerted every single time, which is not how dogs work. A real detection dog is right sometimes and wrong sometimes. But Kane was a prop, cued by a hand signal Rex caught on a long lens, a dog trained to sit on command and call it a hit. Rex built a spreadsheet. Then he did the thing that turned surveillance into a case. He went to the courthouse and pulled the public forfeiture filings, 11 years of them, and he started matching seizures to stops, and the spreadsheet became a map, and the map had a shape, and the shape was a funnel, everything flowing down through Delroy to Roper, to the foundation, to Yandel's auction lot, and back out as clean money. Ronan flew home into that. He hugged Nico for a long time in the kitchen, felt how the boy had gone small and careful, saw the yellow-green bruise along his jaw, and he sat with Pearl while she showed him the seat where the mean man cut baby's chair, and something in him that had been merely cold became something with a temperature all its own. But he did not go find Delroy. He sat down at his kitchen table with Rex's map and he studied it the way he studied everything, and he began to see not a fight but a demolition. The map had a weak point. Every conspiracy does, and it is always a person. Rex had flagged the third officer, Reggie Porter, as an anomaly, because Porter didn't fit. Porter never touched the money at the scene. Porter had a wife and a baby and a second mortgage, and, Rex learned, had transferred into the unit 10 months ago not knowing what it was, and had figured it out too late, and was now trapped inside it, sick with what he was part of, too afraid of Delroy and too broke to walk away. Ronan understood men like Porter. He had recruited men like Porter in a dozen countries, the decent ones stuck inside a rotten thing, waiting for a door. So he did not threaten Porter. He did the harder, slower thing. He had Rex learn Porter's whole life, and then one gray morning, Ronan simply sat down across from him in a diner 2 counties over, ordered him breakfast, slid a folder across the table, and said, "I'm not a cop. I'm the father of the boy your sergeant put on the hood of a truck 3 weeks ago. I know you didn't touch him. I know you've been looking for a way out of this that doesn't end with you in a cell. I'm here to give you the door, but it only opens once, and it opens now." Porter looked at the top photo in the folder, Nico's bleeding face, time-stamped, and he put his fork down and he did not pick it up again, and after a long time he began, quietly, to talk. He talked for 2 hours. He gave Ronan the hand signal that cued the dog. He gave him the phrase Delroy used, "No one's coming," as a kind of unit joke, said before the good stops, the ones with a deployed spouse. He described how the body cameras malfunctioned at exactly the right moments, and how Roper controlled which footage survived, and how the cash was counted in the back of Yandel's shop on Friday nights. And then Porter said the thing that turned a case into a conviction. He was willing to wear a wire. Ronan called Titus that night and said, I have your pattern, I have your insider, and he'll wire up. Come build it. And Titus, who had been quietly opening a preliminary file, said, now it's federal. Don't do anything else. Let me put the machine on it. Ronan agreed. And then, because he was Ronan, he arranged one more thing Titus didn't need to know about yet. A trap so clean that the men would spring it themselves. The federal case grew in the dark for 2 months, the way the best ones do, while the town went on believing nothing was wrong. Titus brought in an assistant U.S. attorney named Corin Frayne, a careful, unhurried prosecutor who had put away 3 sheriffs in her career and had the patience of a woman who has learned that the loud cases lose and the documented ones win. She loved what Ronan and Rex had built because it was clean. No illegal wiretap, no stolen file, just a father's own dash camera, public court records, and a cooperating officer who came in willingly. Porter wore the wire for 6 weeks. He recorded Delroy laughing about the Keech stop. He recorded Hayes bragging about the car seat. He recorded, on a Friday night in the back of Yandel's shop, Chief Deputy Roper explaining to a nervous new deputy exactly how the foundation cleaned the money, which is the single sentence a RICO case is built to catch. Rex, meanwhile, had found the victims. Not the concept of victims, but the people. A widow named Ruthann who'd lost her late husband's truck. An old man named Cliff who'd had $900 taken on his way to a funeral. 3 other military families who'd been hit during deployments. And 1 man, a long-haul trucker named Emmanuel, who had fought his forfeiture in court for 2 years and lost his savings doing it. Frayne wanted them. Not just the crime, the faces of it. A jury forgives a technicality. It does not forgive a knife in a sleeping 4-year-old's car seat. But Ronan had promised himself one thing, and it was not vengeance, exactly. It was symmetry. He wanted the machine to be caught doing the exact thing it did to his children, on federal wire, so that no lawyer alive could call it entrapment, or a bad night, or a misunderstanding. So with Titus's careful, reluctant blessing and Frayne's rules drawn tight around it, they built the last stop. Rex would drive a rental with out-of-state plates down the 84 on a night they knew the unit was working, playing a tired traveler with cash, the exact profile the machine hunted. Every inch of the car was wired for federal video and audio. In the trunk was a locked case of documented serial-tracked cash, bait money. There was no contraband in the car at all, which was the whole point. Whatever Hayes found, they would all watch him bring it. Ronan asked to be nearby. Titus said absolutely not. Ronan was nearby anyway, parked a 1/4 mile up a farm road with Rex's spare radio, because a man does not send his brother into the machine and sit at home. And Titus, who knew him, had left exactly enough room in the plan to pretend he didn't know Ronan would be there. The interdiction unit took the bait like it was starving. Delroy lit Rex up at 10:40 on a Tuesday, ran the out-of-state plate, and his voice on the wire went warm and easy. He told Rex he'd been weaving. Rex, gray-haired and mild, said he was just tired, sir. Kane came out of the cruiser, and Delroy gave the small, flat hand signal Porter had described, and the dog sat, and Delroy called it an alert, and it was all on federal video from 4 angles. Hayes searched the car, found the trunk, found the cash, and, this was the moment Frayne would play for the jury 3 times. Hayes reached into his own vest, palmed a small bag of powder, and produced it from the wheel well with a flourish. And Delroy said the words into the wire, the words he'd said to a bleeding boy on the same highway, said them out of pure habit because he'd said them 100 times and no one had ever come. Relax. Your kind never fights this. Nobody ever comes. Someone came. Titus Rhodes came, and 11 other federal agents came, out of the tree line and the ditches, and 2 unmarked vehicles, with a warrant already signed. And Delroy's untouchable 11 years ended in the wash of headlights on the shoulder of Route 84, in almost exactly the spot where it had touched Ronan's children. They took Delroy and Hayes there on the highway. They took Chief Deputy Roper out of his office the same hour, and the Cordell Police Foundation records with him, and they took Hoke Yandel out of the back of his shop where the Friday cash was still on the table. Sheriff Toll Bracken, 4 times elected, was arrested at his home before dawn. The money the foundation had funneled into his campaigns was the thread Frayne pulled to unravel him, and it unraveled clean. Officer Reggie Porter was not arrested. Porter had, in the language of the indictment, provided substantial and voluntary cooperation, and he stood in the dark at the edge of the scene and watched the men he'd been afraid of get put in cars, and Ronan, from a quarter-mile away, watched Porter and thought, "There's the door." He walked through it. Good. Ronan Keech never threw a punch. He met Delroy exactly once more, across a federal courtroom 8 months later, and he did not glare and he did not gloat. He simply testified, in the same quiet voice he used for everything, and let his own camera do the rest. The video played on the courtroom monitors, Nico's face against the hood, the knife in the car seat, the powder from nowhere, the words in the boy's ear. And there is no defense against a machine watching a machine. Delroy got 17 years. Hayes got 11. Roper, the brain, got 22, because the paperwork he'd controlled to protect himself became the map that convicted him. Every clean signature a link in the chain. Yandel took a plea. Sheriff Bracken resigned in disgrace, and then took a plea of his own. Corin Frayne did not stop with the criminal case. She used it to force the state to open every forfeiture the unit had ever filed, and one by one the machine's 11 years were reversed. The widow got her truck, the old man got his $900. The trucker got a settlement that would not give him back his 2 lost years but would at least let him retire. And 3 military families received checks and, more than that, an apology on state letterhead, which is a rare and heavy thing. Nico Keech testified too, 13 turning 14, and he did it steady. And afterward his father put a hand on the back of his neck, gently, in the exact place a man had once slammed it down, and said, "You did that with a camera and the truth. That's the strongest thing there is." Pearl got a new car seat. She named it Baby 2. And the town of Cordell, which had believed for 11 years that its highway was simply unlucky, learned that it had been robbed in the open the whole time, by men who counted on no one ever coming, and it never voted for a man like Bracken again. Hey, it's Nathan again. I've narrated a lot of revenge stories, and I want to be honest about why this one stuck with me, because it's not the part you'd expect. The satisfying part isn't the 17 years, or the 22. The satisfying part is that Ronan Keech had every reason on earth to do the loud thing, to fly home and put Sergeant Delroy through a wall, because a man who trained the way he trained absolutely could have, and he chose, deliberately, the slower and infinitely more devastating thing. He chose to document. He understood something most of us forget when we're angry, that the loud response gives your enemy an exit. Punch the corrupt cop, and suddenly you're the story. You're the assault charge. You're the unhinged veteran. And the machine grinds on with a new excuse. But outpatience him, outthink him, catch him on his own highway doing the exact thing he did to your kids, on a federal wire, with his own words, and there is no exit. There is no spin. There is only the truth, played 3 times for a jury. That's not weakness. That's the most disciplined kind of strength there is. And here's the takeaway I actually want you to keep, past the drama. The phrase "no one's coming" is a bet that predators make about power. They pick the people they think are alone. The deployed, the poor, the old, the ones with no lawyer on speed dial. Sometimes they're right, and that should make us angry enough to change the laws that let a badge take a car without a conviction. But sometimes the person they pick as alone is the least alone person alive, connected to a whole unit of quiet, patient, capable people who will simply refuse to let it stand. Be that kind of connected. Be the person who comes. If this one hit you, subscribe, because next week's story is about a woman everyone underestimated for 30 years, and what she did with all that underestimating will absolutely wreck you. I'll see you then. Take care of each other.